Well, answering questions in a half-hearted way and not with very full answers, and which raise questions in themselves. Let's start here. This is a cash-strapped government with cash flow issues negotiating under financial distress with a party that is prepared to bail it out of its financial mistakes, hence the donation of 3.7 million for the park that was way above expenditure. So that's and we are being asked to believe that that kind of situation isn't influencing the negotiations. There are plenty of things that we can say on every single issue that the government responded on yesterday, because the answers were far from full and raise questions in themselves.
Now, if the bid was lower than another bidder, perhaps you could say there was some sort of link. But if they're spending more than anyone else who's bid on the plots, even if there was negotiations before, which the government has said that there wasn't, would it really matter?
Well, let me start by giving you this example. The government said that TNG were the highest bidder in the expressions of interest process. The expressions of interest process on St Anne's and Bayside sites goes back a long, long way. If you go to the notices that were issued in December, with a closing date of December 2017, right, 4 years ago. TNG was established a month ago. TNG didn't exist 4 years ago. So how is it possible that they were the highest bidder in an expressions of interest process when they simply didn't even exist in law at the time?
Would the alternative be for the GSD to just not have schools at all? What can the government do? You've said they're cash strapped, but they still want to build new schools. Is the GSD's alternative not to build new schools?
Well, that's like completely sidetracking the issue. That's a government tactic, of course, to sidetrack it into that, and that's not what we're saying. We're saying several things. One, there was a donation here from a related party. Did it influence the negotiations? We're told no, it didn't, because they were the highest bidder. This entity simply didn't exist at the time of the expressions of interest process. We're told that this is value for money, because the schools are going to be delivered and the schools are going to cost 29 million. We were told in Parliament that those two schools would cost just over 20 million. Suddenly, how is it now 29 million? Why are we being told that this is now value for money when we ask the straight question of how was that money assessed, and the government says that they just simply do not know how much profit the developer is going to make until the planning permission process has come to an end. So how did they come to land on the issue that there was a fair value in ascribing the price of 21 million to that plot of land? It might be that after the planning process, what emerges is a much more profitable sale of land to the developers, and therefore it's been sold at a value that is at an undervalue and against the public interest. So it's not value for money. All those questions are left unanswered by the government's press release, which puts a pretense of answering questions, but in reality raises very serious questions in themselves.
Well, since you've taken so much issue with the cost of the plot of land, did the GSD ever do a deal which paid so much per square metre for a plot for development, even adjusted for inflation, for example, in all the time that the GSD was in government?
I mean, look, the GSD was in government for 16 years. You'd have to bring out a spreadsheet and see what mathematical calculations were done. In my experience in government, usually what used to happen is that those advising the government at LPS would ascribe a value to it depending on the developer's potential maximum profit of the land. Here we're being told that the government has no idea, really, what maximum value they're going to get, because the planning process has not come to some kind of end, so they haven't been able to land on what value the developer is going to make. Well, how is it possible then that someone has decided that 21 million is a fair value? How is it really the case that this discussion and donation has not affected or influenced the negotiations? We're also being told in the press release issued by the government and in the interview of the Chief Minister yesterday that they're negotiating with this party on other sites and that they are going to make other announcements. Well, that was news to us. Is it part of a much wider negotiation and discussion? And all of those facts and information needs to be put out into the public domain so that people can make a judgment as to whether in fact this is a proper and value for money deal, against the backdrop of all of that.
Doesn't the fact that they were the highest bidder substantially show that it is value for money? What would the alternative be? Selling the land for less to someone that the public knows more about?
No, Shelina, I'm not suggesting that it should not be sold to the highest bidder. What I'm saying is, how is it that they were the highest bidder when this entity did not even exist, when the expressions of interest process closed? So unless that question is answered, it's not possible to really come to a conclusion on that issue.